and I'm welcoming Sonia Rai and Andy Stanny from Nectar HR. Sonia is the founder and director of Nectar HR, which has been operating for 14 years. The company has vast experience of CQC compliance and ensuring the HR and employment aspects are not only compliant but operating at an outstanding level. Following on from Sonia and Andy's presentation, around 11:15, Kate Taylor will also be joining us from Leicester College with talking about education. Thank you. Over to you, Sonia.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much, Michelle. My name is Sonia Rai. Andy, my colleague, is on the call, but I will be presenting today. Andy's just here as kind of someone watching me present a webinar today. But if you've got any questions for us, we will go through them at the end. You can pop them in the chat as we're going along, but I'll most likely go through them at the end. I am conscious of time and how much we've got to cover. So a quick intro from me. Like I said, my name is Sonia Rai. Thank you very much to Michelle for giving a quick overview of who I am. So I am the founder and director of Nectar HR. I love all things HR. I'm really passionate about it. I have a master's degree. I'm COPD level 7 qualified. I've got about 25 years-ish of HR experience. I love employment law, all things employment law, finding out what's coming up, how it's going to impact our client base, and looking at case law, which we'll talk about more in a little bit. And I also am really interested in regulatory HR, so CQC, Ofsted, different clients that we work with and what their regulators expect from HR. I'm going to do a quick overview of what we do. So I've got a couple of slides on that. And basically, we've popped our email address on here because if you are attending today's webinar and you're staying for the whole thing, at the end of the webinar, we're giving you details of how to contact us for a free 1-hour support. So any question that you've got that's HR related, you can contact us. We'll book in an hour slot with one of our consultants and they can support you with that. I'll run through who we are and what we do, so you get a bit of an idea of the kind of questions you could ask me and the team. So we do things like writing job descriptions, helping you with recruitment, but not like a recruitment agency. So more from the aspect of ensuring that you're using the right recruitment and selection processes, the right tools to attract the right people, supporting you with onboarding, because we see a lot in this sector that onboarding isn't always as compliant as it needs to be. We draft HR documentation, but we are not about a generic model. So we don't go, here you go, here's a downloadable template of contracts or policy. We draft that specifically for each client. We support with disciplinaries, grievances, sickness absence management, obtaining sponsorship licenses, training for your departments, the whole host of HR. We're a national HR consultancy. We like to be quite hands-on with how we support our clients. We are not a call centre, so you get assigned a specific person who looks after you if you sign up with us. And all of our advice is fully insured and legally compliant. So hopefully you've got the best person speaking to you today about employment law updates. So what I wanted to do is actually talk a little bit about what's been happening probably in the last year and then looking ahead. So employment law is something that is always evolving. The government are always looking at workers' rights, ensuring that there's fair treatment of workers and employees in the workplace. And what I wanted to do was go over key changes from last year, what we've got coming up in this year, but also looking ahead, what can we expect in 2026? And the reason why I wanted to do this is because, we work with a wide variety of clients, lots of different sectors, lots of different industries, different cultures, different kinds of businesses. And about 40% of our client base is healthcare and adult social care. And what we find even today with a new client that we might have signed up pretty much last week, is when we're talking to them about flexible working that changed last year, sexual harassment prevention that came in last year, they're still not probably up to date with where they need to be, or the person that's checked the policy wasn't aware that things have changed. And so I thought it was quite important for us to go through that and just have a bit of an update. So in terms of flexible working, last year the rights around requesting flexible working and the process that must be followed changed. So this is a statutory process, which essentially means that there are timelines, there are specific ways that we must handle a request for flexible working within our organisation, and a lot of that changed last year, probably the most changes that we've had to flexible working. So previously employees needed to have 26 weeks or more continuous service, and that changed to a day one right. So now anybody joining your organisation from day one can request flexible working, and there is a very specific timeline and process that you need to follow when they are doing that. And there's a set of there's a framework and a guidance that you need to follow when you are reviewing that request, and when you are reviewing if you can make that request in full, in part, if it's a temporary request, if it's something that you can offer on a trial. And I just wanted to put that at the top of everyone's radar, really, because if you haven't looked at that, if you aren't sure if you've changed your policies, if you're not sure if they're up to date, that's the key headlines that you need to be looking at from last year. So I will now go on to talk a little bit about sexual harassment prevention in the workplace and what changed with that last year. Then I'm going to talk about neonatal care leave and pay. That's coming into force in April, so really just a few short weeks away. Going to have a look at some statutory rates, so what's changing in April. I'm sure you've probably all seen all of that, but I thought it would be very important for us to have a quick review of that. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the new Employment Rights Bill, what we're expecting to see, what we think is going to be happening in 2026, some of the kind of top level headlines that we've seen around that, but also, you know, nothing's kind of set in stone about that. We've got some idea of what might be coming, but we don't have anything set in stone where we could say, right, this is how we need to prepare and this is exactly what we need to do. So let's look at sexual harassment prevention. So this is actually something really huge that happened last year, and again, a lot of the clients that we're working with, particularly in this sector, don't seem to be compliant, don't seem to have done everything that they probably need to do. I've had a couple of people, you know, when I've been at, I was at UK Care Week last week, I was doing a talk there and, you know, just having a chat with some providers. And a lot of people have said, oh yeah, I've used ChatGPT, I've used AI, I've downloaded something. And actually when I asked a few questions around what that looked like, it was quite clear that they weren't compliant with it. So what I would say to you is, if you think you've got that ticked off, just double check it. If you've got AI to support you, it definitely needs double checking, because things like ChatGPT and AI are typically around 6 to 12 months behind what is the most up-to-date employment law, because it scours the internet for what it can find volume of, and the volume is most likely going to be outdated data. So please be really, really mindful when you are looking at this. So the sexual harassment prevention update introduced basically a mandatory proactive duty around taking reasonable steps to prevent sexual harassment of employees within your organisation, and also additional power was given to tribunals to uplift sexual harassment compensation by up to 25% where an employer has failed to take reasonable steps. So a reasonable step might be looking at your risk assessments regularly, making sure that you haven't just utilized AI really heavily to kind of create a policy for you, making sure it's fit for purpose, making sure it reflects your organization. So there are several practices that you can review and implement to prevent harassment in the workplace. And that doesn't just include from your own employees or, say, workers or agency workers. Let's say you have a care home and you've got a external maintenance team that comes in. This risk assessment needs to cover that risk. Um, Outside agencies like CQC or local authorities coming in, um, hairdressers, anything, anybody that's coming on your premises, you need to be looking at what the risks are to your staff and workers in your organisation. So we've given a few examples here of things that you probably need to think about and things that you could add into your organization and add into your policies and processes, and things that hopefully would be quite easy for you to look at. But what I would say, and this is really, really important, is I've done this for the team at Nectar, and I am really mindful that we operate as our own HR consultancy. I could go to a HR consultancy down the road, or one in London, or one anywhere, and say, oh, what have you done? I'm just going to copy that. But actually, they might work very differently to how we do. Their staff might not go to networking events, or they might not go out to places like UK Care Week or the Care Show, whereas our team does. So they are open to different levels of risk. So there might be a HR consultancy that provides a very similar service to what we do, but actually the way in which they work, the people they interact with, they may be fully working from home, whereas we have an office, we have a reception staff, we have XYZ in our office space. So we've got different people that we're interacting with. And what that means is our risk assessments are different. Even though we're providing a very similar service, the way that we interact with our clients, the way they interact with other third parties is different. So we can't just kind of think, all right, we can have the same risk assessment. It won't work. And that's why you've got to be really careful of the generic templates, downloading ChatGPT, using AI, because it will be very generic. So let's have a look at what you should have in place and what you need to be doing to kind of ensure that this is ongoing, because again, the law's been really clear about the fact that we need to revisit this. We need to ensure it's consistent in our organisation. It's a conversation that is happening at some point or time quite regularly. So ensure you've got a policy. Ensure you've got warning systems, ensure you've got ways to act upon that. But, have you got a fit for purpose, fit for your organisation policy around what you are, as an employer, are doing to prevent sexual harassment in your workplace? Have you got bespoke risk assessments? So what I just touched on earlier in terms of how we are very different to a different HR consultancy out there. Have you got an action log? So
Not yet.
oh, sorry, I think I just had some. So could I just ask you to all be on mute, please? Thank you. So do you have an action log? And in terms of that, what I mean is you've looked at your risk assessment and you've got a clear action log of, right, actually, we need to look at this, we need to do that, we need to run training on this, we need to update this. So, for example, when a new client signs up with us at Nectar HR, they sign a service agreement. We are really clear on what we're providing, they're clear on what they're signing up to. Now, as part of that, we have clauses in that service agreement. Can I just ask again for everyone to go on mute? Thank you. So we have clauses in this service agreement. It's a contract essentially. So since this news prevention of sexual harassment has come in, I have added in an additional clause about ensuring that our staff are ensure that they're having a safe working environment when they're working with clients, be that virtually, be that face to face. So I've updated from our risk assessment and our action log, I had an action to update a clause in our service agreement. Then we look at training. So, understanding that people understand what sexual harassment in the workplace is, that they understand how they need to report that they understand who they can come and speak to anonymous, or who they can speak to, but if they could speak to somebody anonymously, that they understand what is and isn't acceptable, that they understand if they were a perpetrator, what might happen, what steps might be taken by the organisation if they were found to be, um, you know, sexually harassing a member of the team. So everyone needs to understand that, but it needs to be a conversation that is ongoing. And sometimes clients will say to us, I don't quite know how to make this ongoing. What do I do? There's different ways that you can do that. You can remind people at your monthly staff meeting of, don't forget, we've got our sexual harassment policy. We've just updated our risk assessment because we've started working with a new third-party supplier, and they're going to now be coming on site to do XXX. So we've had to update our risk assessment, and please be mindful of X, Y, and Z, and ensure you're all up to date with our risk assessments and the policy. So that's what we mean by ongoing. Is something changing in your business that means that the risks are changing? A risk is no longer there. Let's say you had an external cleaning company and now you've moved that in-house, so the risk changes. So the risk assessment needs to change, the action log might need to change. You could put posters around your place of work. People understand that harassment won't be tolerated. So you're setting your framework, what the expectations are, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable in your organization, your culture, your business. You're looking at what changes are happening within your workplace, and you're making sure that all of those policies, those forms, those procedures reflect your individual organization, not anybody else's. Okay, so now we're going to move on to something that is coming up very, very soon, and this is neonatal care leave and pay. Actually, from a personal perspective, this is something that I would have benefited from when I had my daughter, because actually this wasn't available at the time, and it's something that if I'd have known it was there, it would have been really, really great for me to use. So it's actually something that's quite personal for me. But let's get into the nitty-gritty of what it is. So from April, it's going to be a day one right, subject to eligibility, that your members of staff can take a maximum of 12 leaves, 12 weeks leave, in addition to other statutory family leave types. So the employee must have responsibility for the baby that is receiving care. The neonatal care must last for 7 consecutive days, and the neonatal care must start within 28 days of the child's birth. Okay, so let's imagine you've got a female member of staff. They are, preparing for the birth of their baby, everything's going to plan, and baby is born premature at, let's say, 30 weeks. There's a couple of things that you're going to need to action there, because the mother would most likely not have been expecting to take her maternity leave from 30 weeks. So there's a whole piece that you need to do around that, and starting maternity leave early in the right way. But the next couple of months are just a blur for this employee, because they're in and out of hospital, they've got incubators, constant worry, they are worried about what's going on. And then you've got the partner of this female employee, who wants to be by their partner's side and be there for their baby. This now allows them to do that. So employees aren't going to be forced to use up all their annual leave or return to work while baby's still in hospital, or actually you've used your set leave, so now you can't go in and use X, Y, and Z. They're now able, as long as they're eligible, to take neonatal care leave from April 2025. The leave can be taken by the mother, the father, the mother's partner, the adopter, or the adopter's partner. Our understanding at the moment is it cannot be taken by the father's partner or by grandparents. So an employee will receive 1 week's leave, 1 week of leave for each 7 consecutive days of neonatal care. So on the first slide, when I talked about this, I mentioned that the neonatal care must be for a minimum of 7 days, and then they can take 1 week's leave for that. The statutory neonatal care leave will need to be taken within 68 weeks of the birth, or if it's an adoption, then of the placement. And there's a little example there. So a baby born on the 12th of April 2025 is admitted to neonatal care for 14 days. The father of the baby will be entitled to 2 weeks paternity leave and 2 weeks neonatal care leave. So hopefully that example helps you understand that a little bit more. So eligibility for statutory neonatal care will be continuous, will be from continuous service of 26 weeks and earnings above the lower earnings limit. So there is an eligibility aspect for the pay aspect of this. And in terms of what you need to be considering as next steps, you need to look at your neonatal care leave and pay policy and your supporting documents. Now, if you offer enhanced maternity leave or paternity leave, then and you want to offer, then I would suggest, sorry, that you offer enhanced neonatal care pay as well. But that's something that I think you would need to get advice on and you'd need to look at in more detail. If you only offer the statutory rates, then this is again something that you would only need to offer the statutory rates on. It's more if you offer an enhanced payment for your family-friendly pay. So you need to look at a policy that reflects what you want to do as an organisation, that reflects the legal aspects and the legal framework on this, and any supporting documentation. So, for example, your maternity leave policy might have some supporting forms, might have check-ins. There might be some other things that go along as part of your maternity package or your paternity package. You know, I would say go look at this with exactly the same direction. So with exactly the same viewpoint. So if you might want to offer a well-being check after 1 week as part of that to check in with the employee, make sure that they're okay. You know, you could form that as part of your policy. And I think that that's a very well, it's a supportive measure, and I think that that gesture would go down really well. But again, you might decide no, you don't want to do that. But if that's something that you offer in other parts of your business, you want to reflect that. You don't just want something that's quite generic, sits standalone, and doesn't reflect what you do in other areas in similar family-friendly rights. You need to inform the employees of this right. So you need to get your policy together, any supporting documentation, and then you need to communicate that. You might do that in all staff meeting, you might do an all staff comms, you might have a system that you use for communication updates. You need to let people know that as of this date, you are entitled to X, Y, and Z. Here's a link to our policy. Please let us know if you've got any questions. You're probably going to need to have a look at the systems that you use. So if you've got an absence system, a HR system, you're going to need to have a look at what kind of leave it allows. So you've probably got maternity, paternity, adoption, annual leave, sick leave. You're going to need to make sure that this is added into there. And you're going to need to make sure that it reflects the way that your organisation is going to be administering this process. You might need to update contracts of employment if appropriate. So you might have a section on family-friendly policies. Your family-friendly policies might actually be contractual. So there might be a separate policy, but they might actually be deemed part of your contract of employment. We see that a lot with some of the big HR providers that provide the downloadable generic policy, so you need to be really mindful of that. And if so, then you need to update that to reflect the fact that you've got an additional policy or an additional clause in your contract of employment. What I would say about neonatal care leave and pay is I may get asked some questions today. It's not something that we've ever dealt with before. So I think it's going to have to be a typically what, when we have some kind of new employment law update or anything new going on that we also need to understand how it works. I think it's going to be taking a very reasonable approach to this. So there will be lots of instances that come up that aren't quite catered for in the government guidelines, and we're going to have to navigate them appropriately. So I would suggest that you always take the right advice from an employment or a HR expert to ensure that you are following this process safely and correctly for you, for your organisation, but for the employee as well. Okay, so now we're going to be looking at the national minimum wage statutory increases. So these are from the 6th of April. I'm sure you've all seen this in some form of or another. Obviously, we had a debate last week in Parliament for the social care sector to be exempt from this. Unfortunately, that was not passed. And so, we are now supporting our clients with ensuring that they are ready for this wage increase. So I think what you need to be doing is, first of all, making sure that you're aware of all of the pay increases and the different rates. Who's it going to impact in your organisation? Have you got apprentices? Have you got 18 to 20-year-olds? What rates are the 18 to 20-year-olds on currently? And you need to do quite a thorough review. Now, if you're a small business, great, it's not going to take you that long. If you're a little bit larger, you need to be looking at this. If you haven't already done it, you need to be looking at this in detail. You need to be ensuring that your payroll is ready for this and that you are able to implement this from the 6th of April, because you will be in breach if you don't. So you need to ensure that your teams, your HR teams, if you have them, your payroll teams, or whoever is in charge of these processes in your organisation, or be it your external payroll provider, understands the changes that are going on, the uplifts. I'm sure they do if it's kind of external payroll providers, but you will be legally required to implement these new updates, or you'll risk facing penalties and potential action. So, like I said, ensure your payroll systems are up to date. Communicate clearly with employees about their pay adjustments, so that they understand what they'll be receiving. And just avoid those common pitfalls where you're paying staff at old rates or average pay rates, or you're paying incorrectly. The government is also increasing enforcement measures around this. That means that if you fail to comply, you could face significant fines and public naming and shaming for underpayment. So the message is quite clear: you need to stay compliant, or you need to pay the price. It is, they are being quite direct about this approach, and like I said, they are increasing the enforcement measures. So I thought it was very important to highlight that. I know a lot of people will just, oh, do we know that they're changing? Are we ready for that? But thinking about the practicalities of it in terms of your HR system, your payroll system, communicating that to staff. If you work on average pays, or a different way of calculating pay, you need to look at that. But also, you just need to be aware about enforcement measures and what happens if you fail to comply. Okay, so we've talked about what's happened in the last 12 months or so. We've talked about what's coming up in April, what we know about. But now I wanted to talk a little bit about what's coming up and what we know about it. So The Employment Rights Bill was introduced in October 2024, and the aim is to significantly reform UK employment law. It's about enhancing worker protection, modernising workplace practices, and ensuring fairer treatment. So there's a lot of amendments that have been put forward, and the next stage is parliamentary process in the House of Commons. So basically, there's a lot of changes, and let's go through them. So the proposed amendments introduce new powers for the government to bring tribunal proceedings on behalf of workers and provide or arrange for legal assistance or representation for workers involved in civil or tribunal proceedings. This power will sit with the yet to be established Fair Work Agency that will have a responsibility for enforcing employees' rights on issues such as national minimum wage, statutory sick pay, those kind of things. So as you can see, that is huge. That is a huge change to the way that we've currently been working. New powers for the government to bring tribunal proceedings on behalf of workers is absolutely huge. I think this is really going to revolutionise a lot of the way that we work. We're certainly speaking to a lot of clients about this already, helping them get ready, making sure that they understand what the expectations are looking like, making sure that that advice is compliant with what we know right now, but also fit for purpose for that organisation. So there's also proposed amendments covering reforms to SSP, agency worker rights, dismissal and re-engagement, which is known as fire and rehire, which we have seen a lot of in the past, especially some large-scale organisations have used fire and rehire, and it looks like that is now going to be unlawful going forward, or there's going to be a lot of changes to the way that it's done. Collective redundancies, and more. There's also proposed changes around increased trade union rights, areas of recognition, industrial action, and access to the workplace. So there's a lot going on there. We know that in addition to that, we also know about some of the key proposed changes. So we know that, as I'm sure everyone's aware, because it's one of the first things clients often say to us, is they've got less than 2 years service, they've got more than 2 years service. So currently employees need 2 years of service to qualify for unfair dismissal protection. The new bill proposes granting protection from this as a first day of employment, so ensuring all employees have immediate recourse against unjust termination. And again, that's going to be quite a big change. The way that we have been working with our clients for a number of years, even with the 2-year ruling, is we would always follow a fair probation process. We're not huge fans of short-term dismissals. We believe it should still be fair. So for us, as an organisation giving advice to our clients, we don't think it's actually going to change that much, because our clients are already in a really good process of making sure we've got fair policy and process when we're looking at potential dismissals with people for people who have less than 2 years service. But I know a lot of organisations are using short service dismissals very, very regularly, and I think that this will be a big change for them. And if you want some advice on that, we're happy to support. One of the biggest changes I think that is going to hit this sector in particular is rights for 0 hours workers. A lot of clients that we work with in this sector don't always know how they should be using 0 worker hour agreements or 0 hours agreements. And sometimes it's not always easy to establish, because the lines blur between part-time employee, 0 hours worker, self-employed. We actually undertake a number of tests, and we work with our clients to ensure that their workers or their employees or their self-employed are really sitting in the right box. But what we found is this the use of 0 hours agreements is not usually being used correctly with the majority of the clients that we're working with. And we have to kind of work with them to ensure that we are legally compliant. So we will work with our clients to ensure that. But if you're already working in a way that is probably not quite within the framework of what a 0 hours agreement or arrangement needs to look like, and then we've got this additional rights coming in, it's going to massively impact you operationally as a business. You're going to have to completely rethink the way that you are using 0 hours workers, and I'm not saying that lightly. And I'm also not trying to scaremonger. I'm just being really open and honest about something you need to be ready for. You need to look at the way that you are currently using any of your 0 hours workers, and don't think that, oh right, I checked with ChatGPT or I checked with this and we're fine. It's something you actually continuously need to check on in terms of regularity of work and lots of other things. At present, the bill seeks to provide workers on 0 hours contracts and in the gig economy actually with rights to guaranteed hours and reasonable notice for shifts. This is about more stability and predictability for individuals in often kind of precarious employment arrangements. But if you're not already using 0 hours agreements or arrangements in the right way, and then on top of that, you've got this coming in, it will massively impact you. A lot of the clients that we've worked with on changing this, we've had to work with how that impacts them operationally, what we need to do instead. We've had to look at the changes that might impact them financially. We've had to do forecasting. There's lots of things that we've had to do around this. So I would be really, really mindful of that. And I would start looking at that sooner rather than later, because it's better to be prepared and proactive and look at what you're doing now than this coming in next year and this being a huge problem in your organisation. So I've mentioned the SSP there, but under the proposed legislation, SSP would be available from the first day of illness, removing the current waiting period. And a lower rate of SSP would be established to support those who are unwell. They're also looking at strengthening family leave policies, so removing the qualifying period for paternity leave, allowing fathers to take leave immediately upon employment, expanding bereavement leave to cover a broader range of family members, proving more comprehensive support at difficult times. And trade union and industrial action reforms. So they're looking to enhance trade union rights, simplifying process for industrial action, allowing electronic balloting, greater protection for employees participating in those kind of actions. And these measures are designed to strengthen collective bargaining and worker representation. So there are a lot of changes that are proposed in the Employment Rights Bill. We are, like I said, working our way through them, but I think that this is really going to completely change the way that we deal with lots of different employment and HR scenarios. So yes, we've already talked about SSP, about it becoming a day one right, and just encouraging staff to take the time off that they need to recover. Now, I know from talking to providers already, some of the comments that are coming back about this being a day one right. And actually, a lot of the clients that we work with, and we're tasked with going in and reducing sickness absence. Often SSP and the use of it isn't always the first thing that we're going to be looking at. We're going to be, so, if you've got concerns that my sickness absence rates are going to go through the roof with this, if you've got a list of people in your head that you're thinking they're going to be off sick all the time now because it's potentially going to be SSP from day one. There are so many other ways that you can deal with that. We'd be happy to support you in those conversations, but your sickness absence policies, your return to works, your wellbeing checks, your basically the words completely gone out of my head now. Typical, isn't it, when I'm on a webinar? But looking at how many numbers of days a staff member is having off sick, and reviewing what's fair and acceptable in your organisation. There's so many things that we can do in all of those different processes, policies and forms that would act as deterrents. And be happy to have those conversations with you at a later date, because it's not to say that people won't potentially want to use this to their advantage and exploit it. So you as an organization need to make sure that you are still doing what you can safely, still supporting that employee when they're off sick, but that you as an organization are also taking reasonable steps, of which there are many. So we've talked about the 0 hours contracts, and the right to reasonable notice for cancelling, changing or curtailing shifts, the right to payment for shifts cancelled, moved or curtailed at short notice. So this is, like I said, if you're using 0-hour contracts, you might not be using them potentially in the right way from our experience, just because they are difficult to understand, and the way that they are supposed to be used isn't always very easy to understand. It can be quite vague. People can easily fall into difficult traps, and then with all the kind of the complete rehash of these and the huge changes that are coming, will impact lots of people in this sector. It's going to impact lots of our clients, and we're really making sure that they're ready for that. I mentioned it on the last slide about fire and rehire situations. So as I said, these amendments are proposals at this stage. The bill needs to go through the remaining parliamentary process before it becomes law. But generally, I think we've got some themes that we'll be working with there. We haven't quite got exact detail. So, for example, with things that are coming into force or things that have come into force last year, we might have specific timeframes. We might have expectations, frameworks. We don't necessarily have that yet, but we do have a very, very good idea of what the headlines are. And I would expect to see a lot of that coming into force next year. So we've talked about what's changed a little bit. We've talked about the flexible working becoming a day one right. You can now make 2 requests in 12 months. Before you had to wait, before you had 26 weeks or more continuous service, and you were only allowed to make 1 application in 12 months. And now employers have to have a specified list of reasons as to why they might refuse a request. We've talked about the national minimum wage increases. We've talked about, no, we haven't talked about, sorry, paternity leave. So fathers have the right to take their leave in non-consecutive blocks of a week. Maternity leave, adoption and shared parental leave. So regulations were brought in to extend the period of special protection from redundancy for employees who are on maternity, adoption or shared parental leave up to 18 months. After birth or adoption and during pregnancy. And just a quick note for you here, employment tribunals can increase compensation by up to 25% if an employer is failing to follow collective consultation requirements. So with some of the things that we're talking about here about shared parental leave, adoption leave, maternity leave, we're talking about redundancy, we're talking about special protection. If you're not consulting with them properly, if you're not following your certain processes, again, employment tribunals can increase that by 25%. Maybe not for the providers that are on this call today, but there was the allocation of tips that came in also recently, and that was about all tips or allocation of tips being given to workers in kind of like the hospitality industry. We've talked about the duty of prevention of sexual harassment. And oops, sorry, I've just gone way too far. Sorry. I've mentioned about the compensation of up to 25% if you fail to follow collective consultation requirements. So I think There's a lot of changes that are coming in. There's a lot of changes that have come in that not everyone is fully aware of, or they're aware of them and they think that might not apply to me, not sure how that applies to me. Um, and we know that as an employer, this sounds like a huge time of change when it comes to employment and how you're employing people, and maybe the way that you've been used to doing things for a particularly long time. Um, and we are here to help and support. And as such, we are giving everybody that has attended this webinar today a free 1 hour session with us. So with anyone, with me or one of our HR consultancy team, who will have a full hour slot blocked out with you at a suitable time to discuss anything that you have, any kind of burning HR questions that you have. You might have an ongoing sickness case. You might be worried about a probation. You might want a bit more advice on the sexual harassment prevention risk assessments, some of the things that I've spoken about. The slides will be shared, so you'll get a chance to look at them and run through all the areas of that we support on when it comes to HR. But essentially, if it's HR, if it's employment, if it involves people, we will do it. So yeah, you can drop us an email on hello@nectarhr.co.uk, and you need to quote the name of the webinar, and you need to pop that reference in there, which is Inspire Nectar, all one word. We will then allocate that to a member of our team, and we will arrange a free 1 hour pick our brain session. If you have any questions, we'll be going through them in a minute. What I would ask is if you want to know more about us, what we do, but also if you want to keep up to date with all the things that are going on, follow us on our social media. I am on LinkedIn, and Nectar HR is on LinkedIn. We're on Instagram, we're on TikTok, we are on Facebook. Give us a scan, give us a follow. There's lots of useful tips. There's loads of videos that we do, short questions and answers about anything ranging from investigations to disciplinaries to continuous service. We do lots of short, sharp videos. You can give us a follow, and hopefully you'll find our content interesting and informative. So now we have come to the end of the presentation, and I've left some time for questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen in a few seconds, so hopefully everyone's been able to get that, but we will send the slides round, so you'll all have an opportunity to review those slides, and our QR code to follow us on social media will be there as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sonia. I think we'll just give everybody a few minutes to process what you've told them and think about any questions. And it takes a few minutes, doesn't it, if you want to put them in the chat. That was really, really informative. I know that I learned a lot from it, so thank you so much. There's so much information in such a short amount of time. So if anybody's got any questions, feel free to say them out loud, raise your hand, or pop them into the chat. We'll give everybody about 5 minutes just to see if there is anything.
I'm going to just have some water in that time.
Go for it, go for it.
We're just going to say my colleague Andy's on the call as well, so if you don't want to ask me a question, you can ask Andy a question. If you're probably sick of hearing my voice right now, Andy and I are both here to help.
Brilliant. Stunned into silence, I think.
I know.
So I think that's a good thing, though.
I don't know if that's a good thing. I think what I always say to clients is, these changes are coming or they're here, and we don't make them up. It's not our decision what comes into force, but we're here to help as much as we can from a very practical level on putting that into practice for your business. So, sometimes clients will be like, what is reasonable? I don't understand what reasonable is. I don't understand. And, we'll have those conversations and we'll talk through, actually, for you, what feels like reasonable? Is it this? Is it that? And what's reasonable in one sector or one client isn't always reasonable for another. You know,
Yeah.
that comes up a lot with like reasonable adjustments for sickness and things. So I know it's a lot to take in because I've gone through a lot.
Oh, we've got a few hands up. Mercy.
Hi, thank you. Thank you very much for a very useful discussion. I just wanted to ask, you mentioned something about 0-hour contracts. Now, we do domiciliary care where there is a lot of fluctuation in the amount of available work. And so we've had to be using 0-hour contracts in order to remain afloat, and particularly more so with the changes that will be coming in regarding national insurance and the wage rise. We just cannot have everyone on contracts. I don't know whether you could just clarify, are they now illegal or?
It's not that they're illegal, it's just there's a very specific way that you have to use them. And actually, we work with a lot of domiciliary care clients where we get them to a point where they are using their 0 hours contracts correctly. Might not be the way that they were originally using them, but we find the right solution to work within the framework to use 0 hours. So it's not that they are going to be banned or that they're illegal. It's that the way that they are being used is sometimes unlawful practice or banned practice. I'm actually going to let Andy, if he wants to, come in on this because Andy's been supporting quite a huge dom care provider with some of this recently.
Yeah, thank you, Sonia. And yeah, it's definitely been a challenge for employers. Exactly as you say, Mercy. You've got a very uncertain demand on the services you provide, and you need to be able to provide those services in a way that is affordable for you. So clearly you can't afford to have lots of people on the payroll that you are paying when you don't have a demand for the services that they provide, and that's where the flexibility of a 0 hours contract is really, really useful. What we find is that sometimes the use of 0 hours contracts can create grey lines and can inadvertently change the employment relationship. So you might think that you have all your staff so employed have worker status, which allows certain rights but not other rights. But if you don't get the wording in your 0 hours agreement exactly right, you will end up inadvertently creating an employee relationship, which gives them enhanced rights, that gives them the full spectrum of employee rights, which apart from anything else also means that you have to guarantee work for them, even if you don't necessarily have work to provide. So yeah, as Sonia said, we in the team have been working with a large client recently, helping them to navigate that so that their worker agreements where they have 0 hours workers and their employment contracts where they have 0 hours employees are worded precisely so that there is no ambiguity in the employee relationship. Does that help?
Yes, that's clear. Thank you very much, Andy.
Midlands Care, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just got a quick question. My name's Stephanie. I'm the HR manager here. It's just in relation to the sexual harassment segment. Just about, there was a comment about lone working and the wording within that. And I just wanted to just clarify on that with you, because obviously working in the care sector, the difficulty of staff sometimes not being able to solely work that are solely working on their own. So is there any further information that you could give us just in terms of that element?
Yeah, so I think it's more around, so first of all, hello, hope you're well. It's more around understanding that that is something that needs to go into your risk assessment, and that you need to show that you understand it's a risk, but you've also put measures in place to mitigate the risks that are coming up in that. So if we have got someone that's lone working, what's the scenario, what's the backup plan, what could happen, and this is how we've filled that in our risk assessment, and this is how we ensure that we're compliant, or this is how we ensure that that person still feels safe, that they have somebody that they can call in the event of X, Y, and Z. So it's more about making sure that you recognise that in your risk assessments and that you risk assess appropriately. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you. Do you think it's like looking at your lone working policies as well that can work with that?
Absolutely. And, you know, reference in your lone working policy that, you know, for further information on you can see our sexual harassment prevention statement or policy or risk assessment. So, you know, you're kind of like linking the two.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful.
Perfect. Thank you.
There any final question? Oh, sorry, Andy, go for it.
No, I was going to say, could I just add to something on that, if that's okay, Sonia?
Yeah.
So, you know, to Stephanie, hi, it's been a while, hope you're well, and to everybody else. This is new legislation, and it hasn't yet been tested through a tribunal or through the court system. So the bit that nobody can answer yet until there is case law on it is, you know, there is a duty now on employers to take reasonable steps to prevent sexual harassment. What it will come down to is what is defined as reasonable, and we won't know that until a case gets brought before a tribunal and there is case law to cement that. So yes, what is reasonable to you may or may not be considered reasonable at a tribunal, and until we get to that point, we're not going to know that. So my recommendation would be that we err on the side of caution.
Perfect, thank you. Any final questions? Sonia, we've recorded the meeting today, but do you think that you'd be able to share the slides with us anyway?
Absolutely.
I think, it'd be really good for people to be able to look. I know, because they're great questions, but it's such a lot of information. I think sometimes you need to go and process it, don't you, and kind of chew it over a bit. But that has been extraordinarily helpful. So thank you so much to both of you for coming along. That has been fantastic. What I'll do is I'll invite you just to stay on the call for a few more minutes while our next speaker talks, just in case anybody does pop anything into the chat. That would be really helpful. Thank you. So for our final speaker, I just want to introduce Kate Taylor. I can see that she's just joined on the call. So Kate has been doing some work around placements for some students she's working with at a college. I will hand over to Kate and let her introduce herself to all of you here today.
Hi, thank you. Hi, my name's Kate. I work for Leicester College. I'm a trainer assessor in the health and social care sector. The reason that I'm on this call today is to have a talk to you about a new qualification that we are we're delivering from September, from the next academic year, and it's a HTQ, a higher technical qualification in healthcare professions support for England. It's a level 4/5 course, and it's replacing the old HND HNCs. The way this will work is it's aimed more at employed staff. It's a 2-year full-time course, which will involve 2 days in college, which would be a Monday and a Tuesday, and 3 days on placement. Now, if, like I say, it's aimed at employed staff, people are employed in a relevant health and social care setting, they can then use that as their placement hours, which is really good. The first year is the level 4 part of the qualification. That's the more generic part of the qualification. But in the second year, the level 5, there's optional routes that we can offer. At the moment, we're offering the mental health route and a nursing route, obviously to incorporate basic nursing skills and that sort of thing. We can look at other routes as well, if employers are particularly interested in sort of different routes, such as end-of-life care, etc. But that would be something we could look at with individual employers as and when the time arises. We are in talks with De Montfort University, and on successful completion of the level 5 qualification, that the students can progress onto a year 2 nursing degree or mental health nursing degree. So, you know, it's always good if you've got any staff that are looking at going down that route. This might be a step in the right direction for them. Within the qualification, as well as the 2 days in college, like I mentioned, they do need to do work experience hours as well. And this is a total of 450 across the 2 years, 225 in the first and 225 in the second. And whilst on placement, they will complete a professional learning and development portfolio as well. The reason for me coming on this call today is for 2 reasons, really. The first one is more if any employers are happy to support any students that we may have that aren't in a relevant health and social care setting with their placement, that would be great. But the second reason is also to try and advertise it and get it out there, because obviously it's a new qualification for maybe staff members that you have that may be wanting to progress and go a different route for higher education. On successful completion of the level 5, you're looking at sort of assistant practitioner roles, and for the level 4, more of a senior support worker role. So just wanted to put it out there, give you a bit of information so you know it's around. And yeah, and if anybody's got any questions or anything, that would be great. Or, you know, if you want to get in contact on an individual basis, please do get in contact and we can have a chat if there's anything further questions that you have.
That's great. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
If anybody's got any questions, please do pop them in the chat or come off mute and say them in the group. Kate, would you be able to pop your email address in the chat for me?
Yeah, of course.
Let people reach out to you. That would be fantastic. Thank you.
There we go.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I can see that we've got a question in the chat, which I think is for Sonia. So Sonia, for sponsored workers already employed on a COS sponsorship, what rate should be used with the NLW, can't get my words out, or the Home Office rate for sponsorship?
It's got to be the Home Office rate for sponsorship, because that's the minimum threshold that you need to have them on that sponsorship license or that cause. The one thing I would say to people is what you need to be careful of here with putting, if you've got sponsored workers on this rate and you've got this minimum threshold now that you need from the Home Office, is you just need to be really mindful about your pay levels in general. I don't think that there's a huge amount in it, but if you had a male worker that's on a sponsored visa, one male worker, and then the rest are female, and they're on the national minimum wage, you're going to have an equal pay claim because they're doing exactly the same job, but you've got your person on a worker visa being paid more. So actually, any of our clients that are coming to us with this query, we're just updating the banding, and we've been forecasting that for some time. So you need to be really, really careful. So you need to pay them the Home Office rate, but then you need to look at everybody else, because you're potentially going to end up with some kind of pay claims otherwise, and grievances galore. And Andy's nodding his head as well.
Yeah, I was just trying to quickly pull up the current figure for skilled workers in the care sector, but I haven't quite got there yet. But yeah, 100% exactly as you say, Sonia. You know, it needs to be at the minimum at the rate set by the Home Office for that occupation. But you've got to be mindful of paying people equally for equal work as well. So it might have a larger impact than you might initially think.
Perfect. Thank you both. I hope that answers your question, Stan. Any final hand raises for the webinar? I think that's it. Well, if any further questions come through, we'll be sure to send them over to you. But everyone's got your contact details. Again, thank you so much for attending. It's been really, really useful and informative. So I hope everyone else has found it really, really useful. And do take the opportunity as well for that free hour, because there is so much information. That is a fantastic offer. So thank you so much for giving that to our members. That's brilliant.
No problem. Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for attending then.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.